Greetings and warm welcome to the Manifested e-learning platform. Today we continue with the subject Governance and Compliance Audit. The lesson is Regulatory Framework of Governance and Compliance and Audit Industry Regulators. Regulatory Framework of Governance and Compliance Audit and Industry Regulators. The regulatory framework. We're going to study the regulatory framework, then we'll also analyze industry regulators. Now, the regulatory framework for governance and compliance audits in Kenya is multidimensional, involving a combination of primary legislation, sector-specific laws, regulations, and also codes issued by various regulatory bodies. If you are to carry out governance and compliance audits in Kenya, then you will be guided by various laws, what we are calling regulatory framework, various regulations, and there are several. There are many, okay? And we have the primary legislation, we have sector-specific laws, regulations, guidelines, and also codes of corporate governance that are issued by various regulatory bodies. And this framework aims to ensure accountability, transparency, and adherence to legal and ethical standards across different types of entities in Kenya. So we are going to analyze the regulatory framework, then we'll analyze the industry regulators. First of all, there is what we call foundation legislation. The primary legislation. These are several acts of parliament that form the bedrock of governance and compliance requirements in Kenya. And the first rock is the Constitution. The Constitution of Kenya. This is the supreme law of the land, and Chapter 12 on public finance sets out principles for public finance management, including transparency, accountability, prudent use of public resources, which underpin governance and compliance audits in the public sector. We also have Article 229, which establishes the Office of the Auditor General and defines its mandate for auditing public entities. So this Constitution has Chapter 12 and also Article 229. This is the article that establishes the Office of the Auditor General. You understand? Then you have Chapter 12. Chapter 12 of the Constitution on public finance. So that's the first legislation, the Constitution. Then number 2, we have the Companies Act of 2015. Companies Act of 2015. The Act lays down the fundamental legal duties of company directors, like duty to act within powers, promoting company success, exercising independent judgment, avoiding conflict of interest, and also exercising reasonable care and due diligence. So there are provisions in the Companies Act on corporate governance. Those are corporate governance principles, corporate governance. Apart from corporate governance, we have the financial audits. The Act, that is the Companies Act, mandates annual statutory financial audits for most companies, with exceptions for small companies. And these audits ensure financial statements comply with international financial reporting standards and also provide true and fair view. The Act mandates audit committees. Apart from the financial audits, we have the audit committee. And these audit committees are for quoted companies. These are listed companies. And Section 770 of the Companies Act requires the audit committee to annually assess the extent to which the company has observed its corporate governance principles and strategies. So foundational legislation, number 1, Constitution. Number 2, Companies Act. Number 3 is the Finance Management Act, the PFM, Public Finance Management Act. Public Management Act. We have the Public Finance Management Act. This act provides the framework for managing public finances at both the national and the county levels. It also sets out responsibilities for financial management, for reporting, and also internal controls for public entities, which are subject to compliance audits by the Auditor General. So there is this act upon which the auditor uses to audit public entities, including the government entity, the government, national government, and county government. So we have the Public Finance Management Act. It acts as the framework for, first of all, managing public finance at both national and county levels. It also sets out responsibilities for financial management, internal controls, and so on. And all these aspects are subject to compliance audits by the Office of the Auditor General. So we have the Public Finance Management Act. 4, Public Act. The Public Audit Act operationalizes Article 229 of the Constitution because it outlines the mandate, the powers, and the functions of the Auditor General, enabling them to conduct financial, compliance, and performance audits of all national and county government entities, including state corporations, and then report to Parliament and the county assemblies. So foundation legislation, number 1, Constitution. Number 2, Companies Act. Number 3, Public Finance Management Act. Number 4, we have the Public Audit Act. The Public Audit Act. Then we also have the Capital Markets Act. Markets Act. This is another foundation legislation, the Capital Markets Act. This act, candidates, governs capital markets, and it is the basis for the Capital Markets Code of Corporate Governance Practices for issuers of securities to the public. The CMA code is based on the CMA Act. So you have the CMA Act, you can even include and regulations. Capital Markets Act and regulations. It is upon this act that the CMA code has been developed. This code is a legally binding framework for listed companies and licensed intermediaries, mandating annual governance audits by Institute of Certified Secretaries, Accredited Professionals, and independent legal and compliance audits. So we have the Capital Markets Act. Then there is also the State Corporations Act. State Corporations Act is another foundation legislation. The State Corporations Act provides the framework for establishment and operation of the state corporations. It is the legal basis for the Mwongozo Code. The State Corporations Act is the legal basis for the Mwongozo Code. The Capital Markets Act is the legal basis for the CMA Code. So we have this Mwongozo Code, candidates. The Mwongozo Code, the Code of Governance for State Corporations, which sets out specific governance and compliance standards for public entities. Mwongozo also mandates periodic legal audits for these entities. Mwongozo Code. So foundation legislation, we have the Constitution of Kenya. Number 2 is the Companies Act. Number 3, Public Finance Management Act. Number 4, we have the Public Audit Act. Number 5 is the Capital Markets Act and Regulations. Then you have the State Corporations Act. Number 7, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is G, number 7. The Data Protection Act. The Data Protection Act. The Data Protection Act regulates the processing of personal data in Kenya, and it requires data controllers and processors to adhere to data protection principles like lawfulness, purpose, limitation, data minimization, transparency, security, and so on. It is on the basis of the Data Protection Act that we also have the Data Protection Conduct of Compliance Regulations. These regulations provide a framework for conducting data protection compliance audits, including the accreditation of data protection auditors by the Office of the Data Protection Commissioners. The Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. And this makes data protection audits a significant and growing area of compliance. This is another foundation legislation. So foundation legislation candidates, we have the Constitution of Kenya, the Companies Act, Public Finance Management Act, the Public Audit Act, the Capital Markets Act, State Corporations Act, the Data Protection Act. Then you also have the Occupational Safety and Health Act. The Occupational, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Occupational Health, Occupational Safety and Health Act. Occupational Safety and Health Act, which mandates employers to ensure the safety, the health, and welfare of their employees. It requires workplaces to undergo mandatory annual safety and health audits by registered safety and health advisors. You understand? Yes. Occupational Safety and Health Act. So, foundation legislation, number 1, we have the Constitution of Kenya, the Companies Act, the Public Finance Management Act, the Public Audit Act, the Capital Markets Act, State Corporations Act. We have the Data Protection Act, Occupation Safety and Health Act. Then we have the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act. Public Procurement. I, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. The Public Disposal. The Public Procurement and Asset Disposal and Asset Act. The Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act. You understand? This act governs public procurement and asset disposal processes for public entities. It sets stringent rules for transparency, fairness, accountability, which are heavily scrutinized during compliance audits by the Auditor General and internal audit functions. So that's, candidates, the foundation legislation. Number 1, the Constitution of Kenya. Number 2, Companies Act. 3, Public Finance Management Act. 4, Public Audit Act. 5, Capital Markets Act. 6, State Corporations Act. 7, Data Protection Act. 8, Occupational Safety and Health Act. 9, Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act. That's the foundation legislation for governance and compliance audits in Kenya. Candidates, you are studying regulatory framework of governance and compliance in Kenya, and we did state that the regulatory framework for governance and the compliance audits in Kenya are multidimensional, involving a combination of primary legislation. We have outlined the foundation legislation. We are now moving candidates to the key industry regulators. Industry regulators. So we've studied the foundation legislation, including codes. We've been stating codes, like we have the CMA code that whose basis is the Capital Markets Act. We have the Mongozo code, whose basis is the State Corporations Act. So, do you understand? So let's analyze the industry regulators. Now, beyond the overarching legislation, beyond the foundation legislation, beyond the bedrock upon which a governance and compliance audit is based, beyond the overarching legislation, we have specific industry regulators that play a crucial role in shaping the governance and compliance audit landscape within their respective sectors. The first one is the Capital Markets Authority. Capital Markets Authority. Authority is an industry regulator, and it regulates the capital markets in Kenya. Their role is to regulate the capital markets in Kenya. And it is this authority that issues the CMA Code of Corporate Governance Practices for issuers of securities to the public, which mandates annual governance audits for listed companies and licensed intermediaries, and biannual independent legal and compliance audits. The authority also receives and reviews the audit reports to ensure compliance and also promote investor confidence. Central Bank of Kenya, number 2. The Central Bank of Kenya is the second industry regulator, which regulates and supervises commercial banks, microfinance banks, and other financial institutions. The CBK issues comprehensive prudential guidelines. It issues prudential guidelines. This one issues a code for companies that are listed on the stock exchange. This one issues what we call the prudential guidelines. It issues prudential guidelines, comprehensive guidelines. It issues prudential guidelines which include detailed requirements on corporate governance, like board composition, fit and proper tests for directors, risk management framework, internal controls, anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing, and so on. The central bank also conducts on-site and off-site inspection and audits of financial institutions to ensure compliance with Banking Act and its prudential guidelines. And it requires external auditors of financial institutions to report on compliance. So that's the second industry regulator. The third industry regulator is the Insurance Regulatory Authority. Insurance Regulatory Authority. This is the Central Bank of Kenya. This is the Capital Markets Authority. Insurance Regulatory Authority regulates and supervises the insurance sector, and it issues corporate governance guidelines for insurance and reinsurance companies, which cover board effectiveness, risk management, internal controls, policyholder protection, and so on. And what is its audit mandate? The Insurance Regulatory Authority oversees compliance of insurance companies through regular reporting, and also it has powers to conduct inspections and require specific audits. Then we have SASRA. You have one for SACCOS. Okay? We have another one for SACCOS. SACCO Societies Regulatory Authority. SACCO Societies, SASRA. Now, SASRA regulates and supervises SACCOs particularly deposit-taking SACCOs, and it issues regulations that prescribe strict corporate governance and also prudential and operational standards for SACCOs. And what is its mandate, audit mandate? Its mandate is to license and supervise SACCOs, ensuring they undergo mandatory annual external audits by approved auditors and also comply with SASRA regulations and guidelines on governance and financial management. Moving on to the fifth regulator is the Office of the Auditor General. Office of the Auditor General. Office General. Office of the Auditor. The Office of the Auditor General. Office of the Auditor General. The role of the Office of the General Auditor is the independent audit of all public entities in Kenya. This office is guided by the Constitution and the Public Audit Act. And what is its audit mandate? This office conducts financial, compliance, and performance audits for all governance ministries, departments, agencies, state corporations, and county governments, ensuring public resources are used legally, effectively, and efficiently. It then reports to the relevant bodies. We can also say that if reports are a primary source of governance and compliance information for public sector. 6 is the Office of Data Protection Commissioner. We have the Office of Data Protection. Office of Data Protection. Office of Data Protection Commissioner, ODPC. ODPC. Now, the role of the ODPC is established under the Data Protection Act, and it is to oversee the implementation of the Act. The office here issues regulations including the Data Protection Regulations. And what is this mandate, audit mandate? The audit mandate is conducting data protection audit itself. Okay? You understand? It maintains a register of accredited data protection auditors, and this is also relatively new, this office, but it carries significant weight with non-compliance attracting substantial penalties. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. G is the Institute of Certified Secretaries. Institute of Certified Secretaries. Institute of Certified Secretaries. The Institute of Certified Secretaries, candidates in our other lesson, we discussed the role of ICS, particularly in the development of governance and compliance standards. While not a regulator in the traditional sense, ICS is the professional body that sets standards for corporate secretaries and governance professionals. It is this institute that has been instrumental in developing codes like the CMA Code and the Mwongozo Code. It also accredits governance auditors, ensuring professional standards are maintained. And what is its audit mandate? It provides the pool of certified professionals who conduct mandatory governance audits as required by regulators. So these are 7 industry regulators. In this lesson, we've studied the regulatory framework and the industry regulators. We outlined the foundation legislation and the various codes that have been issued together with the industry regulators. So the industry regulators are the Capital Markets Authority. 1. 2. The Central Bank of Kenya. 3. Insurance Regulatory Authority. 4. Sacco Societies Regulatory Authority. 5. Office of Auditor General. 6. Office of Data Protection Commissioner. 7. The Institute of Certified Secretaries. Earlier on, we had identified the foundation legislation. 1 is the Constitution of Kenya. 2 is the Companies Act. 3, Public Finance Management Act. 4, Public Audit Act. 5, Capital Markets Act and its regulations. 6, we have State Corporations Act. 7, the Data Protection Act. 8, Occupational Safety and Health Act. Then lastly, we have the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act. And that's the end of today's lesson. So we've discussed the comprehensive regulatory framework which underscores the Kenya's commitment to fostering a culture of good governance and compliance, using audits as critical tool for oversight and accountability across both the private and the public entities. Thank you. I'll see you in our next session where we continue to share knowledge in governance and compliance audits. Bye-bye.